Hello, our friends, HEEARTS family, Evolutionary Energy Arts family,
Hello there, everybody. Welcome back.
Patreon family, and there were some questions out there and statements that got us going down this rabbit hole from a little different perspective. Renee, one of our Patreons, said, do you think reincarnation could be a form of time travel? And, that was a good question. And in fact, when you start looking at things from all that we know and everything that we've gotten from the guides and our own experiences, we'll share, of course, what our perspectives are on that. And this is a little rabbit hole. I hope you guys have a little time for this exploration down into time travel, reincarnation, transmigration, things like the Mandela effect, and what really is our reality. Again, I think it's all a matter of perspective and where we might find ourselves at any given point of time, even though time doesn't really exist.
Mm-hmm. Well, perspective is a really important tool. It's a tool. We can use perspective in life to get us out of ruts, to get us interested in something. Sometimes it's a matter of just tricking the brain and to get you to where you want to be. Sometimes it just depends on how we approach things, at what angle. So when that question was asked, the information that immediately came out was our higher selves are in the future. And this was another thing that I've always known, but the information just wasn't ready to come out yet. But it is, so it just blurted itself out. Our higher selves are in the future. So that leaves open a lot of information for us here in 3D.
Yeah, and guide me where you want to go with what we have picked out here, because a lot of this is coming from the guides, so to speak. And it is interesting because it felt like the way the guides came through the last time, it was like we were at a different point in time, and a little bit more information may be available now than was available previously, as our perceptions are changing as we are stepping deeper into this yuga. The yuga cycles themselves are fascinating markers of time, and yet it is said that time itself is an illusion. There's this time paradox, because what's a paradox? Well, paradox is, again, something that can appear to be a contradiction, but it's, again, a matter of perspective and where we find ourselves at any given time. And think about that, how much we use that word time. Do you guys remember this 1993 movie, Groundhog Day? Yeah, absolutely. It got to be a little bit of a headache to me, honestly, because it was frustrating, as he was in a loop and he kept reliving the same day over and over and over again. So he started to do things that seemed illogical, because he knew no matter what he did, it was going to replay itself yet again. So it was at times a little dark, very satirical, very strange, but yet I think it was good in that it really gave people something to think about or ponder. It has been said, well, what if you could go travel back in time and make it so your grandfather was never born, like build a time machine, travel back in time, meet grandfather before he created your father or mother, and then eliminate him or stop that timeline in which he gave birth to your father and then you. Would you not exist? Could you even do that? This is what we mean by like a paradox. a paradox. It's really interesting when we look at a chessboard. Now, this is a representation that's very two-dimensional. There's no depth to it. There's no depth to it. So, from one perspective, you could see everything clearly, but from another perspective, you don't get all the details. And so we are multi-dimensional beings. We are operating on more than one dimension at one quote-unquote time. There goes that word again.
I think the chessboard is probably my best representation of how I see higher self in the future and how I connect it. But what I see, higher self, is far away. It's just far away. And since higher self is far away, up above, really up high, looking down at the chess pieces, and let's say your life is the chessboard and you are the 3D and you're one of the pieces, higher self can look down and look at all the other chess pieces and say each individual chess piece has a purpose, it has an idea as far as what it's going to do. And higher self can look down at these chess pieces and say, hey, I know that this person is going to do that, and I know that this action is going to happen over there, and I know that this accident's going to happen over here, and what my player wants to do is manifest this thing. So if I have my player move to this certain position, everything else is going to fall into place and help bring manifestation to my player. So that's how I see it, and looking at things in such a way that higher self is in the future, is able to see what is going to happen to put you in that position to manifest what you're trying to manifest. It is so important to have that conversation with higher self. Oh my gosh, I cannot stress that enough. When you are looking in the mirror every day and say you're trying to heal yourself, or you're trying to learn self-love, telling yourself, I love you in the mirror, telling yourself you're getting better every day. That is direct conversation with higher self, so that when higher self is trying to arrange your life for your manifestation, you have that constant communication. Without the communication to higher self, you might miss the cues, you might miss the signals. You're going to get to where you need to go, but it's up to you, like which vehicle and which path do you want to travel to get there. Higher self is going to give you the most efficient path possible, depending on what you came here to learn and what you came here to understand and what you came here to accomplish. I do believe we have a few layers of manifestation things that we want to do. We want to have our 3D experience. That's one layer, to come here and to just simply be in the 3D and experience the things, experience the solidity of things, experience taste, smell, expansion, emotion. All of these things are from the 3D, and this is why we're here. That's one layer. But then we came to learn other things too, like deeper layers in the soul. And this is where astrology can be fun, because you can look at the moon to understand the mind. And if you understand the mind, a lot of times that's connecting you directly to higher self. It's like, oh, okay, well, I like this and I don't like that. So this is where I need to place myself to get to those places that I want to be in this life. And then the other layers above, we just keep going higher and higher and higher up the 3D ladder and looking at things from different perspectives. And sometimes it takes a 3D perspective to communicate to higher self, say, hey, well, I can't do this. This is not possible. It's nice that you're up there and you can see that it's happening, but I'm here and I'm telling you I can't do this. So sometimes we need to sit down and have a talk with our higher self and our spirit team and say, look, this path just is not working. I'm glad you can see it, but it's not working. And we can do that. I think people kind of get confused and they feel that they cannot have these conversations with their higher selves or the guides. But I'll tell you what, the most important decision maker is in your skin. You hold the power. You hold the light. You hold the candle. You make the rules. They're there as a guided assistance, and they're there telling you like, hey, I see a possible path here if you just do that, but you're the one who decides to just do that. You're the one who takes on that responsibility, and that's probably another layer of this whole paradox, so to speak. It's another layer. You take responsibility for the actions you're going to take in 3D. That's very important. That's very important. How do you do that? Well, to know yourself, it makes it easier. So if there's something coming down the pipeline and you're not going to like it, you can adjust yourself in such a way to just let that pass on by, or you can hit it head on and say, this is a fear and I want to face it. Or maybe I'm not ready to face it, but at least you can see it coming down the road. So this is where, when we do mantras, meditation, yoga, mind, body, breath, the self-love, this is what connects us to that higher self, higher power, higher purpose that guides us in this life. So I hope I gave a good understanding. I do my best, guys.
Yeah, and everything changes. When we're in the game, our viewpoint changes. And often we can't see clearly what we originally had intended, especially if we are really, really distracted with everything that the world gives us to distract us. This is part of the difference in different cultures that we've had throughout different periods. And I'm trying to avoid using that TIME word because it's so much ingrained in everything that we talk about. In some other periods of time, things were easier to distinguish between what you really want and what you really, really are thinking society wants of you. What has happened in this world is that, the pressure from society to become something other than yourself, to become a cog in the wheel of society, is so strong that self-realization, realizing who you are, and what you want, and what you want, not necessarily from, again, the standpoint of what society wants, but from what you, the higher self, wants. Because, again, there is that line of thinking that the higher self is looking at it from a different perspective, a different density, if you will, from, perhaps the future. I found it interesting, too, because I think it was our Special K that had said, Carrie Kennedy, who is also like an intuitive psychic, I guess, what you said is very similar to something that she had said. So, when it popped up in my feed, something from Carrie Kennedy, and it triggered in me, I think we are supposed to speak about this again, because she was saying the same thing and saying that the higher self is in the future. And I said to Cindy yesterday, I said, I really think they want us to make this video because this just popped up and Carrie Kennedy is saying what you just said. So I think we need to share this again. That the higher self is from the future, but then if time is an illusion, what does that mean, that the higher self is in the future? Because that in itself is a paradox. I think, again, it's like you have to look at it from a different perspective. And Cindy was liking this one.
Well, I like this one because I call this the God bubble. This is where you stand in the center and you have all the goings-ons in your life, past, present, future. And let's say if you're out of body, this works really well. But when you're out of body, you're able to stand in the middle of your God bubble and step into the past, step into the present, step into the future. But they're all now. There really is no past, present, future. But you can go to all of these different places. And this is what it's like out of body. Out of body, we're major multitaskers. We can go see loved ones. We can go see different parts of our lives. We can, sit with someone at the cemetery, but at the same time, lend ourselves to another loved one who might be hurting or who might need guidance. And this is because time is taken out of the equation, and we are now an orb. And I just want you to imagine the orb like the sun. Look at the sun. The sun has all different rays coming out from all different directions, but it's still just one entity. So you can be one of those rays, yet still be yourself. And this is where our world opens up, and it is different from being out of body. When we are in body, we are really stretched. We are put in positions that are very, very difficult to bring about expansion. Sometimes the universe might see something coming, and you may see this thing as some sort of a punishment or the darkness getting in your way, when higher self needs to jab you in a certain direction to get you to take some action. And if higher self does not jab you or does not bring pain in this direction, you're just not going to pay attention, and you're just going to sit there. You're just going to sit there. And that was not in the contract. Sometimes you can imagine, or I do, imagine talking to my higher self saying, okay, no matter what, make sure that I do this. Make sure I get this done. I don't care what you have to do, but let's make sure we have this experience. Please. Those are the conversations that are unseen, unknown between you and higher self. And when higher self has such a vast perspective and can see into the future, and it can give you information as far as what to do and provide you guidance, and you will pick up that guidance provided you're connected. And then you get to accomplish things that are in your soul contract. And sometimes that doesn't feel fair, because a lot of things can be very painful, and I agree. Things can be so painful, but it's out of love. It really is out of love for expansion and understanding this world, and I guess I get really emotional about that, because damn, life can hurt, but you do accomplish, and you do expand, and you do reach. I remember these commercials. Rubbermaid is so funny. The commercial, bend and stretch and reach and crawl, and it shows these persons reaching and bending and stretching their bodies in ways that they normally would not, but they have to reach this place to clean it, in their house. So they really have to stretch. They really have to bend. And without this need or this desire to clean certain areas, you're not going to move your body like that. Well, the soul is the same way. Without this need and desire to reach certain areas, you're not going to make certain moves. So it is a very delicate, beautiful dance between you and higher self, and you and the universe. There's a constant conversation going on between you, the trees, the sun, the air. Everything that you come into contact with has consciousness and is speaking to you. And outside of this body, we're able to better grasp that understanding and that conversation. But while we're here, we are contained deliberately just to bring about expansion, just to stretch our souls, just to exercise ourselves, because that is the nature of life, is expansion. That spiral is always going out, always going out. And sometimes in order for it to go out and breach, it might hurt. And this is where we work together with higher self, because higher self can see something coming and say, hey, we're about to reach a goal here. Or, hey, you're about to manifest that thing that you wanted to manifest. I need you to do this. So that's how they work together.
I thought, that light here is a good representation of this in some ways, again, showing that the light goes off in all directions. So, again, the ancients, many people, quote unquote, worship the sun, and we might think that that's backwards in some ways, but there's no clear or obvious representation of source than the sun itself. And obviously the sun is the light bringer and also the sustainer and supporter of life. So very, very important. I mean, without the sun, you don't have planets that have the capability to support life.
Well, the sun is source. When I was floating in front of source, I could see all of these little rays of light. And there was this conversation between myself and source that was so, so fast that it's been like a year and a half, I'm still unpacking it. But there was so much information that came between myself and source about the love of life and having source break off a piece of itself. And it's like I could see the little pieces of light in source moving. And it's almost like if I wanted to inject myself, or if I wanted to see a certain part of my life or even a certain part of someone else's, all I needed to do was reach out and touch one of those little pieces of moving light, and I could get that information. I could tap into that information. When I was having that conversation with source, it was, I'm going to try really hard not to cry, but I might. Just because it was so profound and it was so real, and source was just like me, and it's just like you. If you can imagine the consciousness being inside of the consciousness of another entity and knowing that you are the exact same thing, but just a little piece broken off, but you contain all the information of love and understanding and patience and even anger and all these emotions is what source wanted us to experience. Source wants to know itself, and in doing that, breaking off a little piece at a time to go have an expansive experience in life. Sometimes things hurt, but there's purpose behind it. And that's one thing I can promise you. Whatever you are going through, whatever life is whatever life is doing to you, there's purpose. And if you can just trust that, and I know it's hard, but trust that there's purpose behind it, it kind of takes the pain away and brings in the understanding, because sometimes the pain blinds our understanding. But if you could pull back that pain curtain and say, this is what I'm supposed to learn, it's right there. You just have to move the pain aside and say, oh, okay, well, this is my lesson. It's right here. So much of this is inside of you. It's right there, but pain blinds it. But there's a purpose for that pain too. So, it's a difficult thing to understand, but, we all came here for a slightly different reason. And it's up between you and higher self. It's like, why am I here? Give me more answers. You can pull your spirit team in and say, I need more answers, or I need things to slow down, or I need things to speed up. Don't be afraid to talk to your higher self and your spirit team.
Absolutely. Again, think of wormholes and how we depict wormholes. Again, traveling from one apparent point or place in the time-space continuum to another. Absolutely. And then the same thing with souls, like when the guides come and visit, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes Sita especially, because she's very, very psychic and perceptive, and she could sense when there's beings around. She may start barking and acting a little strange, because the room is literally filled with these beings that are just simply on a different density, but they're right there with us. Again, we're never really alone, because there's so many beings just slightly outside of the visible spectrum, and at the same time outside of our particular time-space continuum. When we do have, I think, a lot of these, I think there's multiple things going on when you talk about the Mandela effect. I think some things are revisions by the dark matrix within the original matrix. And then I think a lot of other things are literally that, again, things have changed. And we may be reinserting ourselves back into the matrix, so to speak, at a particular point in the time-space continuum. I've had 2 instances where I've gone to bed feeling like I didn't want something to happen, at least not yet in that time-space continuum that I found myself in, and was really hoping that it would change. And then when I woke up, it hadn't happened. And things were still the way they were before the event. So I feel like I, through will, kind of shifted my perspective back. And, I think we can. Absolutely. This is why, like, when we talk about the ascension process, I do think individual souls, again, can ascend at any time. And, it's easier to have an individual soul go through an ascension event than it is a collective. When you're trying to shift the whole point of view of a planet in perspective, that's a much, much bigger undertaking than one single individual. But again, the whole purpose of Hinduism is ultimately self-realization. That is the whole point. And I remember getting a book, I want to say maybe it was from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi when I was a kid, and it was all about self-realization, and I had no notion of that concept at that time, and it was like, well, sounds like a weird concept, but when you delve into it, you realize that's the point of everything. It is the point of everything. Again, no one size fits all. And this dark matrix within the light matrix that we find ourselves in tries to jam everybody, into every round peg into every square hole. And it's painful. And it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. And no, it's not the way things are supposed to be. Every one of us is a unique fractal, a unique piece of source. And yet, when we talk about fractals and we talk about the fact that we are all source, exploring its own creation from every different possible perspective, every different vantage point. And I do think, again, we are, as the guides have said, they've given some things away. We are creating worlds. When we come in and we incarnate, we're literally creating worlds that we can then go and explore later. I will share again, like with my mother, when she passed on, she was 90 years old and had lived a full life. And it was right at the beginning of the whole Plague Upon the Land scenario. I really don't think she just wanted to be here anymore. She had served her purpose. And so, she ended up leaving. What did she find herself? When she left the body, she just basically created, out of her experiences here, another version of her apartment that she lived in on the 8th floor overlooking Long Island Sound, and was doing her normal things, which were crossword puzzles and all sorts of scrambles. And, she liked puzzles. They occupied her. And so this is what every time Cindy would view my mom for a long time, she was just doing the usual routine because it was comfortable. And, this is where her consciousness was. And if we are given a normal set of circumstances outside of this dark matrix, the process of basically letting go of traumas during life can be relatively gentle. It's said again in a golden age, when humans are desiring to leave this, they literally go to sleep and they leave this incarnation. Now, golden age will equate to a higher density. From what we understand, we're talking 5th density, but yet you still have an energy body. You have a body of sorts. Again, there's many layers. We are like the Russian dolls, where there's one doll inside another, inside another, inside another. In fact, it goes on ad infinitum. And the reality is, when you strip away all those little individual shells, you eventually get to the fact that it's all one ocean.
You know what, I want to take something Mike said, because it's a really good example of higher self being in the future, and that's what I really want to hammer home. And it is, I think, it can be a difficult thing to understand. But he was saying when he's a child, he's reading books about ascended masters. And he takes in this information, this bubble of information, and he holds on to it and say he doesn't really need it, and he doesn't really need to use it for years and years and years and years and years. So when, at some point when he's over 50, suddenly this information comes into play, and higher self, looking at the whole lifespan, knows that, okay, you need to absorb this information now, because we're going to use it 40 plus years later. So higher self knows when you need to take in the information. It's like higher self can see the whole span of your life. And when you see it like that, you start to understand the power that higher self holds within it. And it's watching. And sometimes you're just not allowed to know information. You absolutely are not. Because if you did know certain things, you might veer off your own course. That's something that higher self just won't let people do. It's not going to do that. So it won't let you come in contact. So if you're asking for answers and you're getting nada, you're just getting chirp, chirp, chirp. Well, there's a purpose for that. And sometimes you just have to lay your trust in that purpose and say, okay, fine, I'm not allowed to know now. But 20 years down the road, here comes that information that you've been asking for. And it's just, life is like that. And there are no magic bullets. And sometimes you don't get information for your own good. Sometimes the information that you are asking for could be lowering your vibration. It could be pulling you down into a bad spot, this thing, whatever it is. So higher self is not going to let you tap into that. And it's out of love. It's out of love. And if we could kind of understand that and trust that, maybe life would be just a little bit smoother. Sometimes we feel like fighting for something, and sometimes we might not get answers, but we're just not going to sit with that. It's just not sitting with you at all. So you push and you push and you push and you push for the information. And higher self, once higher self sees that, okay, well, you've done this much progress, so I guess you can have the information now. So, we shouldn't look at everything as saying, oh, well, that's no big deal. I'll just forget about it. I guess I'm supposed to forget about it. No. You follow how you feel in your soul. And if your soul wants this information, you go for it. And if you're supposed to have it, you absolutely will get it. But you do have to have that drive, and that understanding is like know when to hold them, know when to fold them type thing. And it takes practice. It just takes a lot of practice. And we're going to make a lot of mistakes. But that's what we're here to do. We're here to go in the wrong direction and figure out why, and then we get better at going in the right direction. I know a lot of folks who don't trust themselves. They don't trust their own decisions. They look back on their lives and they're like, wow, I kind of really screwed that up, and I don't trust myself anymore. But those are the things in your life that you look at, and it helps to guide you. Now it's your guiding force, because now you have learned. Now you do understand. Now you do know why. So you start to rebuild this bridge of trust between yourself and the universe, but you go slow. You go slow, and it comes, and things start to come together. When you know better, you do better. So higher self is watching the whole span of your life, and it's like one big bubble up there containing all of this information, and it gives it to you when you're ready for it. So again, the mind, body, breath helps you be ready for stuff.
So when you're looking at the bigger picture, and if truly when we're outside of the time-space continuum, would that make past lives not really past lives, but concurrent lives? Again, it depends on where we want to insert ourselves. And yeah, can we tap into past lives? I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
If you're supposed to, yeah.
If we're supposed to. Now, an aspect of you living a past life at this moment? I think, again, the answer is yes. See, this is where we don't understand necessarily the way consciousness operates, because ultimately we are consciousness. And, even everything that we see is, again, made from a certain substance, the ether, the prana, the chi, the life force. And even, the elements, the 4 elements we know come from that 5th element. But yet in the Hindu texts, it does talk about the fact that there's an even more subtle substance beyond that. And there's a whole another series of realms or worlds, lokas, beyond that. And that could be, again, just one more gradient in an infinite level of gradients. Ultimately, we really don't really have bodies per se. We are consciousness itself. And we do take forms in order to explore different potentials and realities.
Right. We could take a different form. Like animals come in. Have you ever had an animal that you just click with? You just click with this animal. That's your soul animal. You and this animal are having an experience, and it could very well be a past life. It could be an ancestor coming through to talk to you. And you have seen animals that are very human-like, that do human gestures. And I do believe that these are beings that come in the form of animals to help guide us. When we're looking at indigenous Native Americans, they do look at animals as part of them. They're feathered relatives, they're their 4-legged brothers and sisters. They don't see them as anything different. They have a purpose. They all have a purpose, and it's just as important as yours, but they play out a little different role in your life. So, even the fruit hanging off a tree has an understanding that it's going to be used as nourishment for you, for your human experience, and it knows that it wants to be prayed over. It has all of this knowledge inside of you. And maybe one day when we're better able to accept and understand that these different packages, fruit, animal, whatever, has its own understanding and its own purpose, and it knows, and we can accept that, and accept that we also have our own individual purpose and understanding, and just respect it and honor it, and don't try to humanize it. Just know that it's different. It has a different purpose than you do, and it knows how to drive its own bus. just let it. Sometimes that can be difficult, but it's true. It's what it is.
Yeah. So when you look at any creature out there, you may be looking at a younger soul, so to speak, in that particular spark of light has come off a source. At a different point in time, there's that word again, than yourself. Maybe you've had, 1,000 humanoid incarnations, and this being hasn't had a human incarnation at all yet. So it's not used to your perspective. It hasn't explored your perspective yet, but perhaps it will, another 1,000 incarnations later. But yet the essence is still the same. Now, it's also, again, the Native Americans and other peoples like the Hindu tradition and all that have come out of it would recognize that often beings like the Devas, which might have had 1 million more humanoid incarnations than we've had, can also put a piece of their consciousness into a bird, a dog, an elephant, whatever, and be communicating with you using that animal as a vehicle. This is part of the reality of how consciousness operates. It can send a piece of itself off to help others, guide others, explore different possibilities. Yes, absolutely. That dog that you feel so close to, it might have been, your grandfather or a portion of your grandfather's consciousness.
Indigenous, I keep going back there because it is their ability to tap into the earth and tap into her presence and tap into all the things that make up these different packages or these different bodies that contain a piece of source. So if you are living on the earth and everything that you do, touch, feel, see is of the material that creates another entity, then you're going to be in a better place to tap into, say, the eagle and watch through the eagle's eyes and see what the eagle can see. That was very commonplace. That was just second nature. Indigenous children were taught this from such a young age. It was so easy and it just came to them. And many, many people have this in their DNA if they want to tap into it. We're at a point where we are so disconnected that it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. But if you are tapped into this earth, she is going to hear you and you're going to have a stronger conversation with her. And she's going to be able to help you because you hear each other. So we have Mother Earth and Father Sun. They work very much together. I mean, you have to have both and you have to be tapped into both. So the soul is connected to the sun, the body connected to the earth. And when we connect those things in our mind, body, breath, we are opening up doors of information that can really help us excel our life and our being and our purpose and figure out, why am I here? Why am I here? What am I doing? It's pretty insane, but okay.
It can be a little trippy, to say the least. Absolutely, going through that. I've always equated the act of going through the birth canal being very similar to jumping through a wormhole.
It is. That's what I see it as, is, the birth canal or even a C-section, whatever. It's the same. It's coming from one world to another world. And sometimes I just want to throw this in here because I worry about people who get really, really sad, people who might think of harming themselves. They don't really want to harm themselves. They want to go into a different world. Think of it as being born. You're born, you're in this world for a while, you go to another world. When you're having a really hard time in life, things are just not going well. It's not that you want to die, you want a different world. And this is where you make the strongest connections with higher self sometimes, because you need understanding. Something's not working out. Something's not right here. And I need something different. And the stronger that emotion inside of you, the more higher self is going to hear you. The more determined you are, the more you're going to manifest that thing. So we're not sitting here powerless in our 3D vehicles. We just simply don't know. We have not been taught what we're capable of. So hopefully this helps people understand this. Kitty has an understanding. He would have never known that this magical thing could bring water had he not witnessed it and tried it himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, consciousness takes many different forms, and, we have to realize that bigger picture. So, I hope that you guys got something from this. Look forward to your comments as always. Make sure you subscribe to all the channels and give a little thumbs up and a bell ring if so inclined. Much love, source bless, and namaste.
Namaste.